This is Referee's World with Darren Cullum and Richard Mellin.
Hello again and welcome to the Referee's World podcast with me, Darren Cullum, and this is Richard Mellin.
Hi, Darren.
And we continue with the second part of our exclusive interview with the mighty Howard Webb. If you haven't yet heard part one, please do that before you sit down and listen to this, because A, you're going to learn something, and that is primarily the reason why we're here as a monthly audio magazine offering education and training for football referees of all levels. And already in the first part of that interview, Rich, he's told so much that you can learn from.
There's so much in there. There's so much information from the first part of where he started, how he started, why he started, and now we're going to listen to areas of dealing with disappointment, the psychological things, the World Cup final, the famous World Cup final. But a lot of people forget that in 2010, it wasn't only the World Cup final he refereed, but he also refereed the final of the Champions League.
So let's pick up the interview right now.
This is Referee's World with Darren Cullum and Richard Mellin.
Am I right in saying, if I remember correctly, you refereed the Champions League final before you departed for the World Cup final? Was that in that order? Did it come in that order?
Yeah, it did. So I mean, we'd been involved in the Champions League after my first game was 2006, and we I guess we were always a little bit limited in terms of how far we could go because of the progress of the English teams, and I think all the way from 2005 right through until 2009, an English team had made the final, and in 2010 something quite unique happened in that no English team made it past the quarter-finals. It's not that unique these days, but back then it was, and so the semi-finals came about, and I wasn't appointed to the semi-finals, but I knew that I'd done okay. I'd done a quarter-final in Inter Milan, which had gone well against CSKA in Moscow, and I knew we'd got a chance of a semi-final, which didn't come, and then the announcement was made. I received a phone call from UEFA to say that I'd been selected to referee the final, which I was actually driving to do a kids game, a school game in Doncaster. They said I was driving. The phone went hands-free, of course, as a police officer. I answered the phone, and it was UEFA said I'd been selected to referee Inter Milan Bayern Munich in the final, and it was amazing. I was told I had to keep it quiet. I couldn't tell anybody for 2 weeks. So I refereed this kids' game, this under-14 game, knowing I was going to be the champion.
I wonder if they were impressed with your performance, or did you, or were you distracted?
Well, there was one kid who had a go at one of my decisions. I was going to say, "Come on, I'm the Champions League final ref." And then it was announced 2 days before. But of course, an amazing appointment, and I had a great team with me. I had Mike and Darren as usual. I had Martin Atkinson as fourth official, Peter Kirk was reserve assistant. But that game comes at a bit of a risk, I guess, because the world's going to see it. It's going to take place only 10 days before we fly down to Johannesburg, and the world's going to watch it. And here we are at the end of this 3-year selection process for the World Cup. We've had our eyes set on that for months and months, and something could happen in that Champions League final that could jeopardise sort of like your experience at the World Cup. If you think back to Thierry Henry handling the ball against Ireland, well, the referee for that game was Martin Hansen from Sweden, and Martin was a highly regarded referee at the time, an absolute nailed-on World Cup referee. But because of that situation, he didn't actually take charge of a game in South Africa 2010 because of the fallout from that. So these things can happen. But
and then, of course, there's the worry about injury as well, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, you've worked so hard, you've set your sights on the World Cup, so you want to be in top nick when you go down to the World Cup. But of course, this is the Champions League final in itself, a huge occasion. Of course, you want to be involved in that, and it's a great opportunity to show the world that you can do a good job. And I can remember driving to the airport. It was a Thursday. We had to fly 2 days before the game because there was a volcano in Iceland which was spewing out loads of ash. So we had to fly a bit earlier to make sure there was no delays. And I was listening to Talk Sport on the car radio going to Manchester Airport, and Alan Brazil was on the radio, and he was saying, "Oh, it's just been announced by UEFA that Howard Webb's got the Champions League final. I can't believe that. There's no way he's good enough to referee the Champions League final." I remember these words, and I'm thinking, getting hot under the collar. I turned it off, and sort of like 65, 70 minutes into the Champions League final, the game's 2-0 to Inter Milan. Diego Milito scored both goals. It was a pretty calm affair. I didn't have a great deal to do. It was one of those games where you could be anonymously competent, I guess, just in the background, letting things happen. And Alan Brazil pops into my mind.
No.
That shows you, Alan. That shows you.
I tell you what, we've got to take this clip and send it to Alan Brazil.
Felt vindicated.
Have you ever spoke to him ever since?
No, I've never met him, Oh, I don't think I have, but no, I've never actually spoken to him ever since.
Wow.
But it popped into my mind after about 70 minutes thinking, that shows you. I was good enough to do it.
That is genius.
That's a gem. That is a gem. Yeah. So into the tournaments then. What I mean, the selection process I think is well known in the group stages. What happens in the knockout stages and running up to the final itself?
Yeah, I mean, it was, even the group stage was quite interesting, and they do it differently each time, it seems. In South Africa, they announced the first 16 games on block, and we were given match number 16. We were the last team to be announced. We were doing Spain against Switzerland in Durban, and we were thrilled. I mean, it was, I think it was after 7 or 8 days of the tournament that we would be doing that game, so it was a nice time to get in because you've seen a few of the games, you get a feel for how it's going. You don't want to be waiting too long, otherwise you're going to end up, getting edgy.
Sure.
You only feel like you're really part of the tournament once you've had your first game.
Yeah.
Earlier the better usually to get out there, but it's nice to have a few games to watch just to see how things are settling down and how things are panning out. And that game went really well, and there was no issues from it. And normally, they'll normally give every referee team at least one game, of course, and then if that game goes well, it opens the door to a second. But you do know that if you don't do well on your first game, if something happens that's highly controversial or you make a big mistake, then there's a chance you're not going to get a second game. And that happened to a few people out in both South Africa and in Brazil.
Yeah.
They would do one game, it wouldn't go to plan. So you do feel that pressure. You do know that that 90 minutes is absolutely going to be pivotal in terms of how your career is remembered, because I was lucky enough to go to 2 World Cups and refereed 6 games overall. But, 6 games out of nearly 1,000 that I did. And these are so important, these 90 minutes. So you've got to balance that against being relaxed and, doing what you've done many times before. And then I guess the knockout phases are simply selected by virtue of how well you perform in the group stage. And, of course, there's so much politics at play. There's no point hiding behind that. Geographically, where you're from has an impact. They'll try to keep things continent neutral where possible, but not always. Also, any sort of history with a particular team or country, even to the point that in the Brazilian World Cup in 2014, the fact that British-Argentinian relationships aren't great still because of the Falkland Islands impacts upon the possibility of a British referee being appointed to an Argentinian game. Yeah. So those things you've got no control over whatsoever, but they do have an impact upon your personal journey through the tournament.
Can we talk about the game itself? First of all, did you sleep much the night before?
Surprised me well, really. Yeah, I mean, looking back, it's not the most insignificant game, is it? And if you think too hard about it, then it would drive you crazy. But yes, we slept okay. I mean, we're in a decent place. We'd had a good tournament. I had a good team with me, and we were pretty confident going into that game. So we did. I slept quite well, to be honest.
That's good. With the team set up, what was the approach from you guys as regards how you were going to try and control? Did you have a game plan? Did it change as the game unfolded and anything like that?
No, we'd had the usual sort of psychological briefing before the game, which we had before every game. At the time, people were big into sports psychology, so we used a sports psychologist. We had some personal sessions with him during the tournament as well, and pre-match we'd always have a briefing from him. We had a technical briefing as well from a FIFA instructor called Leslie Irvine from Northern Ireland, and we just talked a little bit about what we expected from the game and when we thought would be the right time to step in with the disciplinary sanctions, not knowing exactly, of course, what would happen in the game, but just trying to look at the way that these teams have played before. And we knew also that the occasion could potentially affect the players' mentality, and it was my intention to be a calming influence on the game, to try to manage what was manageable, but not miss something that wasn't manageable. And you know, and when I'll be honest, I was taken back a little bit by the type of game it was. Not for the first 10 or 15 minutes. I thought it was pretty routine. That period had a couple of challenges to my authorities, a couple of tackles that went in. I watched the game back. I watched the game back once and once only. I watched it back with Scott Ledger. Scott's a Premier League assistant. We met a week after I got back. We took my laptop to the local pub with a DVD and I sat and watched it. And watched it after.
How did you feel? How did you feel watching it? Knowing the emotions of the day itself.
The thing that struck me was that it was probably a better game than I remember it being at the time. I came off thinking it had been a really awful game, and it was probably a more exciting game than I remembered. But also, I remember thinking to myself, you know, for the first 20-odd minutes, first 30 minutes, we didn't do much wrong, you know. We really didn't. And, you know, I came in for some flack from some quarters about the way that we handled the game, and I came in for some credit from others. And it seems to split opinion. I can tell you now, my performance was far from perfect. I mean, it was a sort of game where to try to put in the perfect performance would have been nigh on impossible, really. I guess the big talking point that came about was the tackle by Nigel de Jong, which happened around about 25 minutes when he raised his foot into Xabi Alonso. And, yeah, of course, I mean, you know, it's a red card offence when you see, you know, back with the perfect viewing angle, but I just didn't really see it as a. Yeah,
I was going to say your angle will be different to the camera angle because we all can see the camera angle. But what did you think when you were watching that particular one? Because overall, whilst you say you're looking for perfect performance, I don't know if we know what a perfect performance is sometimes. You know, and for us watching you and you guys out there, you, Mike and Darren, we were all on board, and we just thought you're trying to manage as much as you can for that first 20 minutes. There was arguably a caution that could have been applied. I think it was for Robin van Persie. There was management so evident to a lot of us that understand the world of refereeing, but then all of a sudden there had to be a sanction had to come into play, and so consequently, you know, it's down to when did you decide to change your approach?
I can remember I cautioned Van Persie. I warned him after 2 minutes. I warned Van Bommel as well after a poor tackle, and I then cautioned Van Persie on about 13 minutes, and then cautioned Carlos Poyle after about 15. And I remember saying to the guys on the radio that will settle the game down nicely, thinking it would. And then, you know, 7 or 8 minutes later, I've had 2 more yellow cards, and I said to the guys, this is not going to plan. And I mean, both of them said the same thing. You know, come on, believe in yourself, that sort of thing. As we would often talk to each other on the radio, you know, supporting each other. But it was at that point that I recognised that actually, you know, this is going to be a battle now. You know, some games are, and you have to dig in and keep going. And the good thing about it is I can look back, particularly on the De Jong thing. I can look back and know that I didn't bottle the decision. It never actually crossed my mind that could be a red card at the time. And people might say it should have done, but I didn't think to myself, that's a red card, but it's the World Cup final, so I'm not going to send him off. At no point did I think that. There's a tackle by Van Bommel earlier that I thought that could be a red card. But
he was very chunky. If I remember rightly, Van Bommel was really chunky through the whole game, wasn't he?
Oh, he was the entire tournament.
He was a robust player. He was a robust player.
Yeah, absolutely. He could certainly put his foot in. But and interestingly enough as well, he's now the assistant coach of the Saudi Arabian national team and shares an office with me in Riyadh. But I didn't think to myself, you know, this is a red card and I'm going to bottle it because it's the World Cup final. I just didn't see it as a red card offence. You know, high feet tackles are quite difficult, and if you listen to the commentary as well from the game, you know, there's no great sort of like feeling at the time. Oh, that's a shocker. You know, how has he missed it? It was like, you know, maybe he should have played advantage when Xabi Alonso knocked it on to David Villa, and I blew too quick. That was the feeling from, I think it was Jim Beglin was doing the commentary on ITV.
It was.
And I think that was the feeling at the time. But watching it back, of course, you know, you think to yourself, should have been a red card, and had Spain lost the game, then it would have been an absolute pivotal moment.
Is it easy to watch a game back when something like that happens in a game of such a big surrounding with it, i.e. the World Cup final?
You have to watch your games back. I mean, it's absolutely important. I mean, I said to all the guys, you know, you've got to analyse the game back. You know, you really must do that, and be honest as well, and recognise what you've done well. But you know, you've got to try and detach yourself from the decision, because the problem problem referees have is trying to do that because they get attached to the decision that they make, because they understand and can remember why they gave it at the time from what they saw. The way the best way to do it is to try to imagine it's not you refereeing the game, but it's hard because you were, and so to try to be neutral and not emotional about a particular decision is difficult. But it's the only way that you can really be honest and learn from it. But all of us used to do the same. Match of the Day would come on a Saturday night, and we'd sit there, and you'd know that they've only got a limited amount of time to show the highlights on Match of the Day, and you'd be aware that there was a tackle maybe in the 60th minute that was a bit meaty, and actually you've not seen it back since you gave the yellow card, but it could be a red, and you're thinking, I hope they don't show it, because if they don't show it on Match of the Day, then nobody even talks about it. But you're thinking if it's a bad one, they're going to show it, and you've not seen it back, and you're sort of like you're watching it, and you know that the chance that they're showing is 5 minutes before this tackle, and then you see that the next thing they show is after the tackle happened, and they're not showing it, and you go, yes. Even at our level, we think like that sometimes because you just know that a lot of the time it is trial by television.
And, how much self-analysing do you do after games, Howard, or when you were actively refereeing?
Loads, really. I mean, you'd go through the game in your mind all the way home. One of the big things that we developed last year in the PGMOL when I was working there was the facility to take clips. I was working up at the what we call Match Centre, where myself and Dermot Gallagher would watch all the 3 o'clock games, and all the games, in fact, from the day. And I would take clips of the games from the feeds that were coming in from the TV companies, and I would package it in a way that I could then send it to the referee so that after the game they could turn their device on and see the clips there and then.
Yeah.
So they weren't driving 100, 200, 300 miles back or on the train, on the plane, not knowing. You want to be able to look at it and review it and reflect upon it quickly without having that thought of what does it look like in the way that I've just described. So the guys have that facility as now well. But I'd always watch the game back, and the one thing that the PGMOL does in real detail is ensure that the games are analysed in absolute detail, minute by minute, second by second even, and the referees can go through that same process as well, looking back on every situation to look back on.
Just going back to the World Cup final, at any point did you think of Alan Brazil? In the same way that you did with the Champions League?
No, Alan had slipped out of my mind at that point. He might have had a point.
It's just how things come out, Howard, isn't it?
Exactly. It was a tough old game.
We got to the end of the World Cup final. And what was your general feelings as a team and the aftermath the weeks after? Because you've got to have a break. You've got to have chill time. But before you come back to the English Premiership. But what was the general aftermath immediately after the game?
Yeah, we came back into I came back into the country 2 days later. Met Mike Riley, sort of like on the way home. Actually, he met me and we had a chat about the sort of like the best way to deal with the next few weeks. We knew that there was a group of media waiting outside the house, so he put a car on for me so that I could get back safely and that sort of thing. So I realised from that point that my life had probably changed a little bit. And when I got outside the house, there was sort of like 50 photographers waiting for me to arrive back, and TV cameras. Quite bizarre, but that's the way it was. So I had to say a few words to them. We'd agreed that we'd have a few weeks off, so we'd start the season a little bit later than everybody else. Myself, Darren, and Mike, and take some rest, which we did. I went on holiday to Turkey a week after getting back from the World Cup finals, and that was quite crazy. I mean, the amount of attention that was being paid towards me was just for a rest was quite intense.
Can you look back on the World Cup final and say you refereed what they put in front of you?
I think so.
Because it obviously didn't go according to plan as regards the game for the purists. Everybody around the world is watching it, and all of a sudden you get a team playing tactics which are they're not recognised for those type of tactics. No. But you can only as we always say in the refereeing world, you can only referee what they put in front of you, and arguably that's what you did. It wasn't pleasant, perhaps.
No, it wasn't. I mean, and there's a lot of skills that go into controlling a game of football. And, for example, I would get advised particularly in Europe, I would get advised that, if the yellow card isn't working, then find a red card. Now, when they say that, they don't mean just make a red card up. But what they're saying is, look, if you get one of those situations where you're showing yellow and there's a tackle that really could go either way, it's one of those borderline situations. If the yellow card is having no impact whatsoever, then, in one of those marginal cases, don't fall on the side of yellow, fall on the side of red, because you've got to up your game. You've got to do something more to control the game. If the game's calm and, nobody's overreacting, then maybe a yellow card would be suitable. I mean, I've said this quite a few times with the work I've done on BT Sport. It's not, refereeing is not really not black and white, in my opinion. Yeah. It's not that scientific either. Some of the physical preparation is scientific. You need to know the laws of the game. But there's so much that's interpretation. So much is in the opinion of the referee. And, and the yellow card, for example, is not only there as punishment, it's absolutely a tool to control the game. And a well-placed yellow card can absolutely put the game in your pocket. But equally, a misplaced yellow card can absolutely lose your control of the game.
I was going to say, I don't want to sound patronising, Howard, but you're absolutely so on the money. It's so refreshing for us to be reassured by what you're saying is what we're trying to push here for grassroots people that are listening to this. And everything you're coming out with is just a blessing for everything that everybody wants in the game. Like, that's how I see it.
It's true, and I get fed up with it. Some of the TV people always saying, that has to be a yellow card, that's not a yellow card. How, and striving for consistency. But unfortunately, the price that we have to pay for people being allowed to use some personality and some element of common sense is that, on occasions, that level of perceived consistency might not be there. But, as long as you're consistent, even within the game, it's not easy to be totally consistent, because the tackle in the first minute might not be treated in the same way as the tackle in the 60th minute, because, you've got to give your range of management skills a chance. You've got...
Yes. Yeah,
early in the game, and by later in the game, you might have exhausted those channels, and you know that a word of warning might have no impact. So yes, you're going to show a yellow card for the same type of tackle that wasn't treated by way of yellow card in the first minute, because in the first minute you don't know the way that game is going to pan out, and equally, you don't know if a yellow card is going to be too much at that stage. So. I can't really accept these people who say a yellow card is a yellow card is a yellow card. The laws are the laws. Those are the people who haven't walked in our shoes.
No, totally agree.
It's not that clear and simple.
I could have asked for a piece of advice, but there's no point in asking the question because you've just given it. It's just perfect, Howard. Perfect.
Howard, can we just ask you about the work that you're doing abroad at the moment?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I was approached in the summer of 2014 after my retirement was announced. I was approached by the sports minister in Saudi Arabia, who actually as well is connected to the one of the professional clubs here that's local to me in Sheffield United. Is one of the owners of the club. He just said, "Look, would you come and help us in Saudi Arabia to develop our refs?" And I'd already got a contract with the PGMOL at that point, and said thank you for the interest, but no thanks. But then, a few months later, I reconsidered my position and decided it might be nice. Just one of the difficulties with PGMOL, I think, for me, was that I was working with the guys that I'd been a peer to, that I'd been a colleague to for many years, and I was then managing that group. And I felt, for my own personal development, it would be better to step away and create a little bit of distance from there. And at the same time as that came along, with, like I said, myself and Dermot Gallagher have been doing some work behind the scenes, advising the broadcasters. So I've got a connection to broadcasters, and they asked me if I'd be interested in doing something a little bit more front-facing. And I worked out that I could probably combine the both for at least for a period of time. And it's not a bad combination at the moment. It involves a lot of travelling. I'm out in Saudi Arabia.
A lot of sunshine.
2 weeks out of 4.
Winter sunshine.
Well, if I wasn't working so hard, in the office or on the stadiums, I'd be able to sunbathe. But at the moment, it's pretty full on, and a lot of work to do. I'm building a team around me there to help deliver training and development, and make sure that the guys are fit for purpose. And a lot of them are. I mean, there's some talented referees in that part of the world. One of them took charge of the Under-20 World Cup in New Zealand last year, at which I was the FIFA instructor. There's so much passion for football in that part of the world. It really is the thing that dominates spare time for young people out there. So there's a lot of potential out there. We're just trying to increase a little bit the professionalism.
briefly looking at some of the clips that come in on the media, I mean, they have a fever for football just like anywhere else, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the stadiums, are full, 60,000 people in there, and absolutely, it's a hotbed for football. There's no doubt about that.
Why did you decide to actively retire?
Yeah, good question, really. It's something that I'm giving consideration to for about 2 years before I actually decided to finish. At the time, the 45 age limit was still in place for FIFA, so I was too old to go to the next World Cup in Russia. I also felt, Darren, that I'd actually sort of run out of energy for tournaments. I didn't want to go to another tournament. I'd done that, been there, been to 9 in total. I thought I'd run my course in that respect, and I thought it was time for somebody else to have a go as well. But that was like the highlight of my career. The Premier League was excellent, but it really was the tournaments that stood out. Eventually, it is a roller coaster. Being a referee at that level is a roller coaster between really high highs and pretty low lows as well. And after a period of time, the lows do start to take their toll a little bit. And I just felt it was probably time for me to move on and challenge myself in a new field, a new area, really.
Can you tell us about some of those lows that you experienced? Because obviously it's not always obvious to everybody how you're feeling, particularly after a certain game or a certain tournament or whatever. Tell us about those moments.
Yeah, we've all been through them. I mean, you know pretty quickly if you've made a big mistake or a match influencing mistake, and you don't want to make those mistakes. Sometimes you do. It's inevitability about the job, I think. And I've driven home quite a few times feeling pretty depressed about the game. If the thought that anybody thinks we drive home and don't give a second thought or don't care about what we do, so far off the mark, and we do, and then you wake up the next morning and you might think, it's a nice morning, then you remember what happened the day before. And yes, whilst nobody's died, it's still your reputation that's on the line. It's still, you want to do a good job.
There's a lot of pride in doing it right. Yeah.
A lot of pride, exactly. And I can remember I did a FA Cup fifth round game in my last season, Arsenal at Liverpool, and missed what turned out to be a clear penalty for Luis Suarez, and I just misread it. I just thought the two players ran into each other in the box, and when you watch it back, Oxlade-Chamberlain clearly gets there second, and it's still a penalty, and I misread it, and you get back into the car and you're getting text messages from people, and you're going back over and over in your mind about what could you have done different, why did you misread it, you're pretty low about it, you don't go seeking for reports in newspapers on the internet, etc. But sometimes they'll find you. People will text you. Have you seen what's in this paper? Have you seen what's been said about it?
You don't want to know about it, do you? It's just like
you don't. But unfortunately, it still finds its way to you. And you've got thick skin and broad shoulders. Of course you have. We're not shrinking violets. I don't want anybody to feel sorry for them because I choose to be in that job. But equally, after a period of time, you think, probably I've had enough of that now. I want to do something different.
A lot of our listeners, Howard, will be sort of thinking, how do you deal with disappointment? How do you get beyond that? Is it there's mental strength, and how do you build that up? Have you got any advice or tips on that?
Yeah, and undoubtedly mental resilience is the single most important thing that a referee needs if they want to make it to the top. And all the research that has been done, Liam Slack is a sports psychologist employed by PJ Morrell, and he did a lot of work looking at what it takes to be a top ref, and mental resilience was the thing that came out more than anything else. I think you just have to you have to try to put things in perspective. I mentioned earlier that it hurts, and it does. Yeah. Your pride gets a bit of a beating, but something, time and time again, I've made mistakes and come back and done better the next time. All of us have been there. We've all felt pretty low. I've had text messages from colleagues on the Premier League who said, I just can't seem to do anything right at the moment. We all go through the same sort of things, but we all pretty much all bounce back, and we all bounce back stronger, because you have to put it in perspective. Accept it's an inevitable thing that happens in this job of ours. The only way you'll never make another mistake is never to go out and take charge of a game again. I've not made a mistake on the pitch since the day I finished, but I've not refereed a game. So, it's the only way you'll guarantee yourself not making a mistake.
Which kind of brings me on to pretty much one of our final questions to you. Looking back, would you do anything differently?
No. I don't think I would. I don't think that. Yeah, of course, there's some decisions, some mistakes I made. I thought, I wouldn't want to make that mistake again. But it all is part and parcel of the learning curve that you go on, I guess. And maybe making that mistake has made you a better referee in the longer term. So, would I do anything different? No. And what I would say is that, the decision to start refereeing back in 1989 was one of the best decisions of my life, and it took me on this journey, which
wonderful journey,
incredible stops along the way. I'm so grateful.
From a colleague's point of view, it's been wonderful to watch you guys achieve what you're doing, and everybody has to realise that not everybody can referee the World Cup final. Only a select few will ever do that. Jack Taylor in 1974, Howard Webb in 2010. When will be the next Englishman, I wonder?
Yeah, and somebody will. Make no mistake. And also, let's close on the thought that English refereeing is absolutely on a massive high. Yeah. And, we are world leaders. People might snigger if I say that publicly, but, I'm prepared to say that publicly because, when you look back on our record in terms of what has been achieved by this crop of officials over the last 5, 6, 10 years, every single major final, major cup competition around the world has been officiated by English officials, and we've got 2 guys going to the Euros. Only England has 2 people going to the Euros, and that's because we can't choose between the 2 of them.
And it's justified, Jim. Yeah, they're justified.
Exactly,
their selection is
absolutely,
justified.
Absolutely. So let's celebrate, what we've achieved. And long may that continue.
I agree, Howard.
Well, listen, Howard, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you very much for giving us 1 hour, 10 minutes of your time.
No, my pleasure. It's flown by, hasn't it?
And it would be. I mean, we've got a whole stack load of questions that we'd really like to ask you more about, but we can save that for another day. One thing we've got to ask. This is from a friend of ours called Ross, who runs a forum called Ref Chat, and it's a great little website. And we sort of sent him a text and said, look, have you got an idea for a question that you would like us to ask Howard Webb for you? And he said, yeah. Was there any point in your career that you wanted to punch Robbie Savage?
Robbie is a legend. I've got to say, I'm hoping that over the last few months I've been able to educate him a little bit about the world of being a referee. And I've got to say, he does. Okay, he has a bit of bluster now and again, but he is genuinely interested in what we do, and I think he is coming around a little bit in terms of his understanding of the job that we do, and I've quite enjoyed working with him.
I bet he's quite a card to work with, actually, particularly from a media level.
He is, and he's got quite a big heart as well, and he'll ask about how the guys are, and if he sees a guy make a mistake, he'll ask me to send on his regards. And so, behind all of that noise is somebody who's is genuinely into his football, and actually does have quite a big heart. So hopefully one of the benefits of being, because I've got to say, working within the BT sport world is interesting. It's challenging. The TV world is absolutely unforgiving. If you put one foot wrong when you're broadcasting, people jump on you like a shot. But and there's that balance between trying to support the guy, trying to give information, insight, understanding as to why a decision has been made, and then at the same time, people wanting to say, well, is it a mistake or not? And it's not so easy for an ex-referee to be involved in that world, because automatically people think that you're there simply to highlight mistakes made by ex-colleagues, and that is not something I would take any pleasure from whatsoever. But of course, people expect you to have an opinion and call it as you see it. So far, we're sort of like 6 months into this broadcast journey, and I'll let other people decide how successful I've been in terms of trying to give insight into what we have to do and the thought processes that go into decision making. Most of the guys are still speaking to me at this stage, which is good.
Yeah. Well, look, like I say, a big thank you for talking to us. We would one day like to come back and have continue the chat with some other bits, but I'm sure there's been a lot of referees listening to this around the world, as Rich has said, that have really learnt from the things that you've just said over the course of the last hour or so. Yeah,
I'd like to have a little bit of an update when we talk to you next time, Howard, in a few months' time perhaps, and see how the job out in Saudi Arabia is going for you. And what sort of numbers of referees have you got out there at the moment that you're looking after?
Well, we've got in the country, we've got just over 1,000, so
right.
It doesn't compare to what we've got here in England. Obviously, we've got 27,000, I'm told, but about 1,000. I'm working with around about 20 in the top division referees, and probably double the number of assistants.
Okay.
And I'm really enthused by the job out there. It's really great, and it's testing me as well. It's challenging me, but hopefully they're absorbing some of my experiences, and
I'm sure.
and hopefully we'll see some gradual improvements. And it's not always easy to measure improvement, but if the guys go onto the field feeling more confident or feeling that they're better equipped, then I've done my job really. And for me, the key thing is to leave some sort of a legacy there.
Passing over your skill sets.
Not to go in there just for a few months and then come back having not achieved anything. I want to change a few things there so that the environment for the referees working out there is a better one than what I found.
If it's the same Howard Webb that was here on the Premiership, in the World Cup and in all those tournaments, now working in Saudi Arabia, it will be a success.
No, thank you.
It will be a success, Howard.
Howard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us on the Referees World podcast.
Thanks, Darren. Thank you, Richard, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This is Referees World.
Listen online at refereesworld.co.uk
Or search iTunes for Referees World.
So there you go. In total, 2 parts, an hour and 12 minutes of Howard Webb on the phone. I don't know if you noticed in the background the phone kept going off. The landline kept going off in his house. Did you hear all that?
Yeah, I did a little bit, yeah.
But no, fair play. He was with us for an hour, 12 minutes, 13 minutes, which I didn't expect, which was just great. He could have gone on for ages.
Oh, yeah. Well, and as we've already invited, another visit as regards an interview, he'll give us that, and for sure, I mean, he's worth listening to for hours and hours on end. I mean, the ironic thing is we were able to get a window of his time when only this week he's been 2 nights with BT Sport covering a full Premiership programme, and he's given us an hour and 12 minutes on this occasion. So pleased.
It's a good result of that. So please, listen again and listen again, because to get somebody like Howard Webb on the phone, to give us that much detail in the way that he did, I just think is great. And it just goes to show, even though he's sort of retired now from the game as such, he's still so committed in trying to encourage people to come through the system. And for that reason, he's prepared to give that level of time to a podcast such as ours.
He's a football man. He's a referees man. For obvious reasons, everybody recognises Howard Webb. I mean, there was questions from people that we didn't get to ask. I mean, we asked the one from Ross. We did actually ask a couple of questions that were sent in by Mike Morgan, but we didn't identify Mike, so I apologise on that one.
But it's worth pointing out as well, we also had a list of questions ourselves that we were going to ask, but he kept answering them within the answers that he was giving anyway. So we were like, oh, right, OK, we don't need to ask that one now. There's a couple of those, wasn't there?
Yeah, he was well-versed in dealing with media inquiries, wasn't he?
A true pro. And like I say, post and share this, because it's definitely worth listening. And you can do that by listening again on the website, refereesworld.co.uk. If you want to follow us on Twitter, by the way, Rich is on Twitter Watch. How many we got now?
Oh, the last count I had was just under 3,300. So
wow,
we're being watched.
Excellent.
We're being watched. And
watched and listened
to. The word is spreading.
And on one final note, at the point you're listening to this, we are but 2 days away from Richard's 60th birthday.
Oh, thanks, Darren.
So happy birthday, Rich.
Thanks, mate.
You're disappearing off to Spain and having a bit of golfing session and leaving Lynn behind and one thing and another. But happy birthday, mate. You don't look a day over 70.
Thank you very much for listening.
No, he's got all emotional now. It's the Referees World podcast with Darren Cullum and Richard Mellon. Thank you very much for listening.